Hello and welcome to the debate. I'm your host, Maqbool, with you at PTV World. In today's show, we're going to be taking a look at two top stories. The first is in reference to what is going on in Syria and, of course, in the ways in which that we have seen the rebel forces also indulge in infighting in the country. And we've seen that also being backed reportedly by the HTS. And this is, of course, something that is of grave concern in terms of the law and order situation and security for the people of Syria and the current situation at the moment, but also in terms of how bigger powers such as the US and Russia are actually looking at this situation, which is quite evident in an exchange of words at the United Nations with reference to the involvement of each of the different parties accusing each other of being part of this conflict or not supporting terrorist issues or threats in the way that one is expected to. But whatever is the situation on the ground and what is going to be the way forward in terms of the country's involvement, such as that of US and Russia, and then moving forward, what will be the context in which this will then culminate in the larger regional areas and conflicts as well, including, of course, the genocide in Gaza and the overall conflict in the Middle East. What really is going to be the way forward out of the infighting and who's responsible is, of course, something that remains to be seen. And we're going to be taking a look at that in the first segment of the show today. Our next one is going to be taking a look at what is happening in terms of the discussions between the BCCI and PCB. And this is something with regards to sports and Champions Trophy that we have seen previously as well being discussed, and something reportedly the PCB did agree on with reference to neutral grounds regarding the Champions Trophy. However, this has now been extended to all ICC events in India, to which the BCCI has reportedly talked about the fact that there is no real security threat or concerns for that to happen. And so we've reached a deadlock once again in terms of how this is going to move forward. And unfortunate, of course, that sports is being affected in all of these discussions. But what is the way forward and what will be the ICC's most probable response is what is going to be something that we're going to touch upon at the end of the show today. For this and more, as always, in the studios, I've been joined by senior analysts Farrukh, Pitafi and Raja Faisal. And we've also been joined online for our first segment by former ambassador Mr. G.R. Baluch. Thank you very much, Baluch, for joining us in the debate. A pleasure having you as always. I'll start with you with reference to what is going on in Syria and the kind of situation that we face there with the rebels and infighting, and of course with reference to the support by the HTS. And I'll come to the larger interests of other powers, including the US and Russia, later. But if we take a look at what is going on inside Syria at the moment, what do you make of this current situation, and what sense of evolution do we see coming out from this fight?
Yes, and really it's tragic to see that Middle East, which has seen such a bloodshed in Gaza and later shifted to Lebanon, and again the same fire has again rekindled the kind of civil war that we saw in Syria, which for practical reasons has been sliced into different kind of factional territories where each faction holds its part of the country. Yet I think after 2016, the Syrian regime in Damascus, that is Bashar al-Assad's forces, very effectively assisted by Russia and Iran, and obviously Hezbollah also to some extent, was able to regain the control of its northern city, and it's the second largest. And in fact, Aleppo is the commercial hub of Syria, while the capital is Damascus, but most of the trade and other activities, I mean manufacturing activities, whatever they are in Aleppo. And historically, Aleppo has been a very, very strategically important city for all the invaders as well as the occupiers of this land. And the recent surge and offensive by the extremists, especially the HTS, which is affiliated with Al-Qaeda, has given a big setback to not only Syrian regime in Damascus, but I think it is probably started to look as if a new dynamics in Syria might emerge, and that will impact the overall situation in Gaza, in Lebanon, and overall in the region. We must not forget that Saddam, the regime in Syria, Assad's regime in Syria, Iran and Hezbollah were part of the axis of resistance, as was being termed by Iran. So I think this big setback, if at all really they are not able to reverse it, Assad's regime, then in that case, I think there will be a big setback for that axis of resistance, and also that already Hezbollah has been its capacity has been depleted in South Lebanon by the current offensive by Israel. If they lose this, basically Syria acted as a transit route for replenishment of and supplies of its weapons, and even the Syrian territory was used for the training of Hezbollah. So that will be a big, I think, setback for Hezbollah. But it's very, very complex. And the other fear that I have it, if HTS really consolidates in Aleppo, Hama, and Homs as it is proceeding, it could directly threaten the Russian naval base in Tartus and an air base in Latakia. So I think that will be another dynamics of this situation where Russia might, it has already has been assisting actually Bashar al-Assad's regime in bombarding the resistance, and that is how they were able to take it back. So I'm afraid that maybe we see another unfortunate story of civilian casualties, another humanitarian crisis, which really is there. I think over 4.5, I think 450,000 people have been made homeless, and there have been several casualties and bombing of hospitals and civilian areas. So I think, unfortunately, yet another humanitarian tragedy is unfolding before us. Yes, Sana.
Right. Faisal, I also want your take on that with reference to the ways in which we have a lot of international players also unfortunately involved in this entire process. And we've seen a number of these countries, of course, in one way or other reportedly being part of this conflict. And I want your take then on what that means in terms of the escalation or de-escalation of the current conflict, because this has been going on for such a long time now, and we've seen that repeatedly these incidents and efforts are being undertaken. And then we see, of course, different countries back different forces. And that is, of course, something that then brings in a lot more players in the equation. And so given the current situation, what would that mean then for the international players, and how will they actually take more cognizance of the situation and move forward?
Yeah, Sana, that's a very good question. And obviously, when we, have a look at whatever is going on in Middle East right now, it is turning out to be a scrambled egg kind of situation in which we don't know what part of the egg is where and who's actually controlling it. If I take you back to 2020, the situation was that Russians, they sent in wagoners, and Prigozhin at that time, he himself visited Syria many times, and he was making sure that the allies of Russia, Bashar al-Assad and his regime, they were taken care of, and and during the Biden's administration, it wasn't a sort of a problem for Israel when it came to a stable Syria, and Syria was to some extent stable. But now when there are clouds of Trump coming into the Oval Office, of course they have to brace themselves as well. If Trump comes into office, the kind of no war policy he's going to pursue, in that context, what we can see is that Israel wants to have its surroundings as troubled surroundings, so that they can keep themselves busy in their own yard, not extending weapons or not extending any violence towards the other side. So that's why I see Israel being behind it, because suddenly all of these rebels out of nowhere, they've started pouring in, and they are the ones who city after city, they are rampaging, the rampage which we have been experiencing since almost a couple of weeks now. It is apparent that the Israelis are behind it. And by the way, the war crimes they've been committing on their way to Aleppo and in Aleppo, and then of course the kind of war crimes they are committing city after city, village after village. It is apparent that the violence is coming back in Syria, and of course, the bordering areas as well. And when we talk about the Kurds themselves, they are very gallant fighters as well, and they themselves are quite ready right now, because they feel that if Iraq is pumping in its resource to continue this war, if Iran is going to pump in further weapons as well, then it is going to be a stage where every one would be performing to safeguard itself. So Kurds, they would be performing as well. Then Turks, they are already inside there because they have the stakes as well. And when it comes to rebels themselves, they will be seeking money, seeking weapons from everywhere. And right now, why it's happening at this hour? Because apparently everyone knows that Russia itself is quite busy in Eastern Europe, and while they are busy there, of course they can't do much about it to safeguard its ally. But as long as Ambassador Saab was rightly pointed out, that the kind of situation Syria is right now, having an air base, having the naval base as well of Russians, of course Russians would be interested in pouring their resource here as well. If they do that, then how they are going to differentiate between the Eastern Europe theater and the Middle Eastern theater? If they do focus on this side as well, then of course they are going to divide their focus. So in that context, I think it's a larger prism in which they will be focusing all over. And when we talk about Iran itself, Iran has its stakes in Syria, Iran has its stakes in Iraq, Iran has its stake in Lebanon, and of course they have good relations with Hamas as well, and they were behind Hamas during all of this episode since last year. So it is a step by the forces to widen up the theater, the war theater, so that there are more players in it, and Middle East becomes a sort of hot table, so that when the Oval Office gets occupied by Trump, straight away he can't get out of it. He will have to do something about it. And in the initial phases, like 3 or 4 months or 5 months of the initial presidency this time around, it would be so important to see what kind of steps President Trump is coming up with, and it would be quite interesting to see how he deals with everyone says that he has very good sort of relations with President Putin himself, and if this is the case, how he's going to try to manage everything, and what kind of impact the Middle Eastern crisis would have on Eastern Europe theater. So this is a sort of scrambled egg which I'm seeing at, and in coming days it would be quite interesting to see how things get managed out there.
Right, and Farrukh, I want a similar perspective on this from your side as well, given of course the way that we have seen, particularly in the United Nations, the kind of exchange between the US and Russia, and this is of course something that has been spoken about quite openly, and we've seen that this is something that has been going on for quite some time now. But given the current scenario in the larger context of things, what we see in Gaza, what we see in the Middle East, what we've been seeing in Syria and Ukraine, and in the political differences that we have seen in terms of the US and Russia, what really then will be any sort of effort towards de-escalation if possible in the current scenario, and if not, then what happens to these countries such as Syria that seem to be on a self-destructive path?
Right, Sana, thank you very much for the question. I think that when you talk about Russia and the US confrontation, their things are very clear. When you listen to the hard right, I was listening to a video that Tucker Carlson did from Moscow, and he said that accept it or not, America is now in a hot war with Russia, and it is going to bring about doom of everybody, right? So we'll have to wait and see when Trump comes what exactly is going to happen then. But when you talk about another player, which is very important and who has actually been a champion of Donald Trump twice, in 2016 also and now also, that is Benjamin Netanyahu. Because of his war in Gaza, he managed to upstage, the Democratic Party's moral stance, and because of that, a lot of people did not vote for that party, and they kind of sort of collapsed. And they also tried to boot, because of all of this tension and everything, the sitting president, who was the runner, who was the candidate of Democratic candidate for the presidency also. Having said that, now Benjamin Netanyahu, as they say, that there are two tragedies in life. One tragedy is to get your, not to get your heart's desire. The other one is to get it. So in the end, Netanyahu got what he wanted in Washington, D.C., but now he's also afraid because things are so unhinged. Remember that Donald Trump is a smart cookie, and he's actually, when you talk about philosophy, his philosophy resembles that of Nixon, madman doctrine, that you become so irrational that the other side cannot predict what you are doing. And in doing that, you manage to advance the interest of your country. Last time, when in 2016, Obama was trying to actually mitigate the impact of clash of civilizations. At that time, Hillary also would have done something similar. So Netanyahu backed Donald Trump, and what happened was that Donald Trump very quickly went after, ISIS, finished it at that time, decapitated the leadership, and after that he declared that the global war on terror is over. This time also circumstances are quite interesting because Netanyahu now feels the pinch because everything, walls are actually walking in on him. So what exactly does he do? All of a sudden, out of nowhere, remember that last time when after the invasion of Iraq by America, when Saddam government collapsed, and Shia militias actually arose in Iran after Iraq. After that, we saw that there was a Shia resurgence everywhere, right? We have seen books like Shia Revival as well, and that was the policy that was informing everybody. What happened was, all of a sudden, you start seeing, first, the rise of ISIS, and then organizations like Jabhat al-Nusra, which is, by the way, now it has actually rebranded itself into a moderate form, and now it is called Hayat al-Tahrir al-Sham, which is the movement, the organization for the freedom of Syria. So that organization now once again is on the front and is fighting. Again, the problem remains the same. What happens in Syria, what happens in Iraq, in these places, it causes a lot of human displacement, and because of that also, people when they go to Europe, remember last time they went to Syria, Alan Kurdi also died on one of the shores. At that time, it created a kind of pushback, which was a right-wing pushback. And that also helps Netanyahu, because then the world is looking towards the right, not the left, and every reactionary leader actually rises. So Netanyahu is trying to break the whole system. I think that Iran at this moment is very influential with Syria, so is Russia. So with that kind of influence, Netanyahu might be doing something that is quite before your eyes. But whether this game will carry on, because Donald Trump, again, as I pointed out, is very smart when it comes to these kind of things. He does not want to expend any kind of money, so to speak, of American people. So I'm really going to see how in coming days the money that goes to Ukraine is already drying up, but whether the money that goes to Israel, whether that is going to dry up or not. If that does, what exactly happens to all that replenishable, arsenals? And similarly, when it comes to Syria, I don't think there is any buy-in for any further U.S. intervention in Syria, because at this moment, the promise is that he is going to end wars, not start wars.
Yeah.
So we have to see. I think that Netanyahu might have actually, cornered himself into a place from where he cannot come back.
Right. Ambassador Sab, I want your perspective on this as well, particularly in terms of course, the new leadership in the US and the way forward for countries like Syria. Of course, we've seen that this has been going on for many years. Now we've seen, of course, the genocide in Gaza continue, and we've seen decades of suffering previously as well. And then there's a lot of involvement within the Middle East of a lot of these countries. So I want your perspective on what really will the new leadership actually bring forth, and whether or not we can actually move towards any positive change, even if it's not coming from these countries, but coming from within the countries and its people.
See, as far as the US is concerned, and since now is around the corner, a new regime or a new president will take over who has an entirely different perspective on the global politics, and especially when it comes to involvement and committing of US soldiers or even US money now. So I don't think that US would be in any way interested in any new theaters of war in the Middle East. So essentially, they will leave Middle East to the, in my view, what I think is that the coming US administration will leave Middle East to the devices of Israel, and particularly perhaps Netanyahu are like him. What they do with it, it appears that now the internecine battles between the Arabs, between the fratricidal wars within these countries, which are already fractured, weak neighbors, because essentially by breaking down Israel, by breaking in a way Israel's strategic objective of neutralizing the two major Arab countries, that is Iraq and Syria, has completely changed the balance of power in the Middle East in favor of Israel. So it appears that that continues that strategy, and it also at least the present government in Israel seems to thrive on the continued crisis, because that helps them militarize their state and continue to galvanize the pro-Israeli lobby in the West and the US especially, that Israel has a mortal threat from these mad Muslim and Arabs. So I think it's, again, it could be an opportunity for Israel that this conflict, which is unfortunate from our perspective and from the perspective of the Syrian people and the Arabs, whose blood will again be spilled here, innocent civilians actually. Because if this crisis prolongs, what will happen is that Hezbollah would try to shore up regime in Damascus, because I think from Iranian and from this Russian point of view, the sustenance of Bashar al-Assad's regime is strategically important. In fact, almost indispensable. If he goes, that will completely reverse the balance of power, which they cannot realign it back into their favor. Despite the fact that there's a pressure on Russia in Ukraine, but I think this has been in fact, Syria has been a very, very strong ally of Russia for the last, even the Soviet times, or Soviet Union when it was the erstwhile Soviet Union, from that time onwards. And so I think it's their strategic asset to project their power, to have influence in the Middle East, and to remain a relevant global actor in this vital region. So I think they would go all, without any limits to make sure that regime stays. And if that be the case, so I see, unfortunately, again, like another bloody fratricidal war continuing for several months, perhaps, till the time one of the party wears out. Which one will wear out, really don't know, because there are several other actors, as we all know, several regional actors, extra-regional actors. So it's really a very sad moment for the Syrian people, and especially I feel very personally sad, because that was my first posting as a diplomat, and I stayed there for 5.5 years, and I've seen Aleppo in its prime, I've seen Damascus in its prime. What a wonderful people, what a wonderful country, and what has happened to it, one can't believe it. So we can only hope and wish that this conflict really comes to an end, and the Syrian people again can reunite despite their differences and their fault lines that they remain in this. But the reality is that I see this tragedy prolonging further in many months, many years perhaps.
Right, and that is indeed unfortunate, and you're quite lucky to have actually seen Syria in its prime. Ambassador Saab, I also want your take in terms of what is being discussed as international terrorism, something that was quoted as part of the UN as well. And I want your take on whether or not such a phenomenon truly exists in terms of the way that these countries are actually viewing it, in terms of understanding that it's an international threat, or it's a threat for all, or it's something concerning for all. Because it seems that everybody has different versions and different enemies, even when we look closer to the issue of terrorism. And so can there actually ever really be a true collaboration on this front, or a true agreement on this being a global threat, which is true for all the different parties within this conflict as well?
Yeah, definitely. I think probably STS is another incarnation of Al-Qaeda. As we know, its core is Al-Qaeda. So one would not be, it will not be out of calculation that if they are able to consolidate, or even the way they are predicting that they perhaps, if they can take over Hama and then Homs, they are not too far from Aleppo. And if Iran and Russia are not able to really sustain their continued support of the regime, and regime does fall in one of the scenarios, in that case, again Al-Qaeda will resuscitate here, and we would see yet another phase of the extremist terrorism in the region, which can definitely affect all other parties. So I think this point perhaps would bring in all the parties, regional and extra-regional, and the global. I'm referring to the US and the Western countries and Israel, perhaps even, because Israel will be much more threatened if Damascus is tomorrow really in the control of STS. I mean, Israel will not be safer. It is more safer in the while Assad is in power. And as we all know that since the 73 war, this has been the most stable border, but that is the border between Israel and Syria on the Golan Heights. Of course, it has always been incursion from Israel, but from the Syrian side, there's been nothing, no movement except for Hezbollah on the other side. So I think there is this dynamics of this crisis which is happening today, that if really these extremists are able to take over Damascus and are able to dethrone Assad, Bashar al-Assad, I think in that case an entirely new phenomena will probably will see in the region, which I don't think will be in the interest of any of the global or regional actors, and they'll make sure that this does not happen. Nonetheless, they won't mind Iran being kind of further, they're given further setback, Hezbollah being further weakened. That seems to be the calculation of those forces which might have helped this militia to go for this offensive. That Iran being on the defensive after Hezbollah's setback, also apparent setback in Gaza, Russia bogged down in Ukraine. So there was this kind of opportunity, they thought, and they went ahead with the support of those forces, which we all know could be. There are many suspects actually. Yeah.
Right. Thank you very much, Ambassador Saab, for joining us and being part of the discussion today. And Faisal, I'd like your take on that as well, in terms of particularly the issues of international terrorism. And you've spoken about different, of course, terrorist entities and their outreach globally as well. But in terms of actually fighting this, and what we've seen previously with Al-Qaeda, if that's the reference that is being spoken about, can that truly happen again?
Slara, when we talk about Middle East, of course, it is all about creating and generating the security hazards for all of the countries. Reason being, Israel wants ultimate presence of American forces in Middle East, and they can only do it through that as long as theater is all open for all the stakeholders. In that case, of course, we always see that even the Middle Eastern countries that are thriving in terms of their economies, like if we take the example of Saudi Arabia Vision 2030, I mean, it is a supreme example that how how they're thinking about their future, the way they are moving towards more and more progress under MBS and the Neom city and more opportunities of attracting more business and attracting more FDIs in their country and attracting more tourism in their country. Same is the case with Qatar, same is the case with the UAE. All of these countries, they are so safe for the world, but still, I mean, when you talk about Iraq and when you talk about Syria, these two countries, why there is this problem once more being ignited, because once there is insecurity in these two countries, then ultimately the rest of the countries of Middle East, they would be of course cautious, they would be of course curious about their security as well. And we know that now when we were hearing the echoes that Middle Eastern countries, they want to have good business with China as well, they want to have good relations with other regional countries as well, including Iran. In recent times we have been seeing that they want to revive all of the ties with Iran as well. Now what is happening is that this kind of intrusion in Syria would ultimately open up a new theater that would create a deterrence for the other countries that are performing really well, like Saudi Arabia, UAE, Qatar, Bahrain. All of these countries, they will be deterred as well, and ultimately they would rely on the Western powers, and once more we will be seeing all of these sophisticated goons like French forces, like US forces, like British forces. All of them, they will have room in their persistence within these countries as well, and that would ensure Israel a long standing sort of stability in their country, because as long as they are not alone in the region and they have rest of the goons as well in the region, not at a long distance but just an arm's distance, they are all okay. And probably this is why they just wanted to open up as many as theaters they could, so that once Trump takes the office, he does not think about leaving all of these people on their own and trying to fix their own country. And the international theaters, which we have always been getting the echoes about, that Trump is anti-war, he doesn't want to keep his forces elsewhere, he just wants to bring them back to his own country, and he wants to focus his own economy and doesn't want to rely on war as an economy. So now Israel is making sure that Trump, by all means, when he gets into the office, he says, oh, okay, there are very good friends we have in the Middle East, and of course we have to secure them as well. And as long as he keeps the presence in the region, that's good for Israel.
Farrukh, your take on international terrorism?
Regarding, excuse me, regarding the state of affairs, I just wanted to point out when it comes to Netanyahu and Syria itself, right? First of all, let us look at Syria and understand who is a good player, who is a bad player. If you think that Bashar al-Assad is somehow a good actor, right, then you are sadly mistaken. They all are bloody butchers, right? They have killed their own citizens and they keep on killing them, right? On the other side is HTS. HTS is actually, it believes in formation of Sharia-led government there, right? And what do we know about that? It is essentially the terrorist model, ISIS, Daesh model that will apply when they actually succeed. So it kind of reminds me of what was happening in Afghan jihad's time. And that is a concern that is here. Because at that time you create these blind spots for these radical extremists, and they continue to actually succeed. Eventually your interest wanes, and what happens? They start exploding and they keep on impacting. Now that is also not a bad scenario for Netanyahu, because as I pointed out, whenever there is any focus on Islamic extremism, Islamophobia all over the world increases. Whenever there's massive displacement and refugee crisis in Europe, elsewhere, again Islamophobia increases. So Netanyahu is one of those people who who believe in destruction of the opponent, of Muslims and whatever it is, even at the cost of Israel. The kind of damage that is done to Israel, Sana, you will know in 4 or 5 months, once the American system has changed, once other things have changed, you will see how quickly Israel's moral space is going to deplete and just wane away. Having said that, terrorism is going to be a concern. There is going to be an effort to revive it, but Donald Trump again, I mean, give the man his due. There are many things in which he is totally beyond anybody's understanding. But when it comes to these matters, the way, effectively he actually closed down the terrorism destruction industry, and he actually shifted focus to a great powers, competition. That was quite intriguing. And I think that in that kind of world, Netanyahu and his regime don't have that kind of space. In that kind of world, terrorism also does not have that kind of space. And when it comes to one country, that is Iran. Now we have to wait and see how Donald Trump's equation with Iran plays out. You know about Elon Musk's meeting with Iranian ambassador. After that, what we saw was that the rhetoric from both sides actually went down instead of going up. So we still have to see how exactly is going to be negotiation between America, the new administration, and Iran, because in the end, remember that US would want to have an ideal world where it wants to work with certain countries and not with certain other countries. But the problem is they are bonded together. For example, when you talk about India, they want to work with India, but India is closely wedded with Russia. They would want to actually work with Russia so that they don't align with China, but they are closely wedded together. Then they would want to work with Russia, but not Iran. But Iran and Russia are very close bonds, right? They kept on aiding and abetting each other. So with that kind of state of affairs, in the end, countries like Iran still have a shot, and Israel, because their populist leader wanted to survive in government, he has played every card that Israel had.
Yeah.
And now the problem is he is a mortal. He is going to disappear one day. Whosoever succeeds him is going to bear the burden of the crises that are going to be there.
Right. We're now going to take a look at our next segment that is going to focus a little bit on what is happening at home with reference to sports, and particularly cricket, and of course the discussion with BCCI. And this, of course, is something that has been going around for a while as well, and we've always, of course, moved forward with positive dialogue on this front as well, with reference to what can possibly be done in terms of a neutral ground. And it seemed that there was some sort of agreement there initially, but now again there seems to be a deadlock with reference to this being offered by the PCB to all ICC events being conducted in neutral ground, something that perhaps hasn't gone down too well with the BCCI. And Faisal, I want your take on that first, in terms of, first of all, this entire negotiation of finding a neutral ground with reference to the Champions Trophy, and then, of course, with reference to all ICC events. What seems to be the problem here, if there is a discussion or a concern around both the countries participating on each other's grounds? Why is a neutral ground such a bad option?
Yes, Anna, this is what happens when hate-filled politics meets with the BCCI chairman every day.
Yeah.
I'm talking about Amit Shah meeting Jay Shah every day, and of course they will be mixing cricket with the politics and the kind of politics we have in our eyes of BJP. It's hardline politics, it's hate-filled politics, and especially they are very generous towards Pakistan when it comes to hating Pakistan, and probably in every field they want to hate Pakistan. They don't want to respect cricket as a sport. They don't want to respect our players as a sportsman, and they know that their own people, they love Pakistan's sportsmen, cricketers, but they don't want to see that. They don't want to see that their players come into Pakistan, and they already know that there are fascinating players like Kohli, like Sharma. All of these players, they have huge respect in Pakistan. People love them, and whenever they would have come to Pakistan to play in Pakistan, they would have seen that love from Pakistani spectators. But here we are, Amit Shah and Jay Shah playing their dirty games, and the only dirty game they can play is how to, of course, alienate Pakistan, be it politics, be it diplomatic world, be it international arena, be it cricket. They want to simply alienate Pakistan in every way possible, and that is why we saw that these talks, they were heading towards this side. And to me, I'm sad about it. You know why? Because cricket is like a it's like a second religion of people of Pakistan and India as well. In India's case, it is considered, sometimes it is considered as first religion of the Indians. So to me, I think when you have this kind of game that carries a huge impact, you should never create hurdles when it comes to bringing both of the countries on the same podium and coming to each other's countries. Here, of course, now what is the equation we are going to get in the future? Of course, Pakistan has said that if this is the case, that they want the neutral venue, and elsewhere they want to, of course, play hybrid model, which we are talking about. Then, of course, whenever there is World Cup in India, whenever there is Champions Trophy in India, whenever there is a mega event going to take place of cricket in India, will reciprocate with the hybrid model once more. If their matches cannot be held in Pakistan, then Pakistan's matches should never be held in India. If this is the way they want to keep the cricket, then let it be. And to me, the only sadness I have, that I want both of the countries' cricket teams to play in each other's land. Even I'm someone who have always talked about, very recently somebody from India at a very, from Indian military at a very high post, I talked to him and I said, it's my wish one day, rather than Wagah border, we can have half of the cricket stadium in India, half of the cricket stadium in Pakistan, one pavilion in Pakistan side, the other pavilion in the Indian side, and let's play there rather than smashing our boots on the roads and
become a tradition as well. But anyway, let me actually come back to about this particular issue with you, Farrukh, as well, especially in terms of politicizing sports. And it's unfortunate that that has happened and that we can't seem to get out of this entire discussion. Why is that? We have our political differences. There are political differences around the world with different countries. Why is it so hard in our case?
Right, Sana, thank you once again. And I must once again apologize for my earlier coughing fit. I cannot assure that I'm not going to break into it.
It's okay, we're prepared.
But regarding what Faisal was saying, first of all, my mind's imaging actually went to Wagah border, and then I realized that instead of pavilions, there might be landmines on both sides, and then instead of the cricket ball or hard ball, they actually use grenades or something like that, because that is how things actually have been spiraling out of control. One thing I must tell you, one mark of a bad loser or a sore loser is that once you lose in any match, you stop playing and you want to actually destroy the other side. And this is what happened during the first or second year of Modi government's takeover. After that, Pakistani team went to India and whitewashed, right, and defeated them. All of a sudden, what happened was that their media exploded. They started refusing to play with us, and then all of a sudden, LOC actually heated up also, and it continued for quite some time. India kept on pounding LOC as well. So this is who they are, especially these numbnuts who are actually ruling India. And it is fortuitous that Faisal actually mentioned Jai Shah, because he is son of Amit Shah. Amit Shah was tragically, I told you about his charisma, that it can be fitted into a teaspoon, right? But he at least has brains. When it comes to his son, the gentleman was tragically born without a personality or without any kind of mental equity. So at this moment, his elevation to the top of ICC from BCCI actually shows what they have been trying to do in the past as well. They created Big Three just to ensure that Pakistan just dries up. At that time, terrorism also happened. And we know that Syrian, Sri Lankan team was attacked, and there was some kind of Indian connection also. So they have been systematically trying to abuse Pakistan cricket. And the problem is, these people don't understand the spirit of a good sport is that you can lose as well.
Yeah.
If you are always going to be, you are going to rig the game, that you are always going to win. What is the point of playing?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you very much, Farrukh, and thank you, Faisal, for joining us as always in the debate. That's all that we have time for. We'll now see you tomorrow.